I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who planned an ambush for her own husband. Yet that night, I sat quietly in a luxury apartment in Tribeca, up on the 18th floor, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, my hand resting lightly on a stack of documents spread across the glass table. The place still smelled like fresh paint and expensive walnut wood. An open bottle of Napa Valley wine sat on the bar shelf, the kind my husband used to call unnecessary indulgence whenever I suggested buying one for an anniversary. I had found everything 3 days earlier in a way that still gives me chills. While searching for last year's tax returns before meeting with our accountant, I rummaged through the safe and found an unusually thick envelope with no label. Inside were legal contracts for a limited liability company called Cedar 41 Holdings. Nothing too unusual, until I noticed the address tied to it. An apartment in the upscale Hudson View complex. Jason once joked it was where money launderers buy property. My hands trembled as I read the transfer statement. Over $280,000 pulled from our joint investment account, the same one we'd built up to retire in Charleston. A small steel key labeled office storage slipped out from between the documents. Only there wasn't a single storage room in Jason's clinic that used this kind of rectangular key. I would know. I'd designed the layout myself when he first opened the place. I stayed quiet. No tears, no confrontation, just a plan. Instead, I spent the next 3 days uncovering everything I needed to know. Jason had a client dinner scheduled for Saturday night. It was on the shared calendar. He liked to keep everything synced so I'd never have to guess. I just smiled. Lately, these dinners had become frequent. Suspiciously so. And clients never had names. I took an Uber, carrying a simple tote bag. Inside were copies of the apartment purchase contract, wire transfer documents, and printed messages I'd recovered from the iCloud account he forgot to log out of on his old iPad. Nothing shocking in the texts. Heart emojis, 1 a.m. conversations, and the promise, just a few more weeks. I arrived before sunset. The doorman didn't question me when I scanned the key card. Jason hadn't just used our money to buy a love nest. He'd even registered the LLC with our home address for mail. Inside everything was new, perfect. A shiny brown Italian leather couch, Scandinavian glass chandeliers, and a fresh set of sheets that still smelled like detergent. I sat down and laid out every piece of evidence, documents, photos, account statements, messages. Beneath every page was a year I had stood behind Jason, when he was unemployed, when his first eye surgery failed, when his mother was hospitalized for 3 months. I was the one cooking, cleaning, calling doctors. I turned down a master's scholarship because he said, "You can always go back. But this partnership opportunity is once in a lifetime." Turns out the once-in-a-lifetime thing was this apartment, and someone else. I didn't know exactly what would happen when they walked in, but I was certain of one thing. No one would walk out of there without facing the truth. I poured myself a glass of wine and sank into the sofa. The soft golden light illuminated the evidence across the table. The elevator dinged in the hallway. The performance was about to begin. A key turned gently. Then the door creaked open. I didn't turn around. I calmly reached out and switched on the table lamp beside me. The warm light spilled across the room like a soft slap across the silence. Jason froze at the threshold. The woman beside him, tall, slender, hair loosely tied back, lips still carrying red lipstick, kept her hand tucked into his arm like they had just finished a romantic dinner. I looked up, the corner of my mouth curled. Not quite a smile, not quite pain. "Good evening, Jason, or should I say, welcome to your second home." The woman instantly pulled her hand back like she'd touched a flame. Jason stood motionless, his eyes scanning from me to the spread of files on the table, then to the glass in my hand. His face drained of color. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" I stood, walking toward them. Each step echoed against the wood floors, like punctuation in an unspoken sentence. "The real question is, why did you think I wouldn't find this place?" Jason swallowed hard. The woman took a small step back. "Jason? Who is she?" I tilted my head, as polite as a dinner host. "I'm Evelyn, Jason's legal wife, and you must be the one he calls his new light in those 2 a.m. messages?" She widened her eyes. Jason jumped in, voice rushed. "Megan, I was going to tell you, Everything happened so fast. 6 months, Jason. That's not fast, I cut him off, holding up a statement. Here's the transfer from our investment account. The one you told me never to touch because it was for our future. You've been tracking me? I chuckled softly, shaking my head. No need. You left a trail. Even this idiotic LLC mails paperwork to our house. Who do you think handles the mail? Megan, pale as chalk now, whispered with a trembling voice. You said you were divorced. I turned to her, my voice not loud but sharp enough to slice through the tension. I made him breakfast this morning. Divorced? If that's true, I can sue you both for fraud and misuse of marital assets. Jason stepped back, bumping into the doorframe. He had never seen this version of me. Not the Evelyn who avoids conflict. Not the woman who stays silent when hurt. Evelyn, I messed up. I know that, but it's not what you think. You've been distant ever since your father passed. I felt lost. I blinked once, then walked over to the table and picked up a printed text message from iCloud. I told her I stopped caring. That I'd been emotionally absent since the funeral. That I'd become a stranger. Jason, do you remember I turned down a scholarship from UCLA to stay and care for your mother? I sold my car. I quit my job to help you open your first clinic. And now you reduce me to being cold? My voice wasn't raised, but Megan still took another step back. She looked at Jason like she was truly seeing him for the first time. Jason stammered. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. And not just once. You used our money to buy another woman a bed. And you're calling that a mistake? I turned to Megan, eyes fixed on her. Did you know the sofa you're about to sit on was paid for with overtime shifts I worked in the ER on weekends? Megan opened her mouth, maybe to say something, but stopped. It was clear, she understood, and everything was falling into place. I looked at them both and nodded slightly. Good, now everyone knows who was betrayed, who paid for it, and who directed this whole show. I returned to the couch, poured another glass of wine, completely calm, like wrapping up a meeting. Anyone want a drink? We've got plenty to discuss. Property, legal responsibility, and of course, the number of years in prison if I decide to sue for financial fraud. The room went still. Jason didn't move. Megan just stood there, pale as a sheet. The next morning, I woke up in the house that used to belong to both of us. Now, it was just mine. Jason never came back. And I didn't expect him to. I sat at the kitchen table, morning sunlight spilling through the windows, my phone placed in front of me. Not waiting for a message from Jason, but from Riley Spencer, my best friend from college and one of Chicago's top divorce attorneys. In legal circles, they called her the diffuser for her ability to handle volatile cases like disarming explosives. Precise, cold, efficient. Riley texted a single line. Meet me at 11. Bring everything. I didn't need to ask questions. I'd been ready for this a long time. I pulled out a leather envelope from the drawer in my home office, one I had prepared over a year ago, when I first sensed the shift in our marriage. Inside was the post-nuptial agreement I had begged Jason to sign when he expanded his clinic the second time. It's just precautionary paperwork, I'd said back then, casually. Jason had chuckled, calling me paranoid from getting older, then signed without reading closely. That document had a very specific clause, financial infidelity. If either party used shared marital assets for undisclosed personal purposes, especially involving an extramarital affair, the other would receive 70% of the marital estate and sole ownership of the primary residence. Jason didn't remember it. But I never forgot. Before heading to Riley's office, I reviewed the documents again. The condo purchase contract under the LLC, wire transfers from our investment account, and a full financial report I'd requested from someone in my past. That someone was Grant Ellis, my first boyfriend from law school. He now worked at an investment bank and kept in casual contact. I'd sent him a message. Need to verify an LLC linked to my husband. Can you help? He responded within 2 hours, attaching a flowchart that mapped over $190,000 siphoned from our joint account, funneled through smaller transfers into an account under Cedar 41 Holdings, the shell company used to purchase the condo. I had also opened my own bank account a year ago, slowly transferring portions of my freelance art income into it with every side project I picked up. Jason never noticed. He assumed I was still dependent. He was wrong. I also had emails from the building management of the condo, confirming Jason as the original lease signer. He'd told them he was separated. I had posed as his assistant over the phone. It was easier than I expected. And the most damning piece? Photos from a private investigator Riley referred me to. Jason and Megan entering the condo building holding hands, 3 times in 2 weeks. One of those nights, Jason told me he was on call at the emergency room. When I laid the stack of files onto the glass table in Riley's office, she raised an eyebrow, her voice low and impressed. "You gathered this like an FBI agent?" I answered with a smirk. Riley skimmed the post-nup, her eyes pausing at the financial infidelity clause. "Not many people dare to include this. Even fewer make it legally binding. That was a smart move. It wasn't pride that kept me silent. It was the weight of years spent believing in the wrong person." "So here's what we're doing," Riley continued, flipping her laptop toward me. "We'll send a divorce petition, request an asset freeze on everything under Jason's name, especially the condo tied to the LLC. I'm also filing to audit his clinic's finances in case there are more hidden transactions." I nodded. Riley added, "And we're not mentioning the post-nup until his lawyer shows up. The element of surprise is everything." I glanced out the glass wall, the city stretching below me. The house I once thought I'd grow old in with him was now just another asset waiting to be divided. I no longer felt sorrow. Only strategy. And justice. 3 days after my meeting with Riley, I got a call from an unknown number while I was organizing documents in the museum's archive. I almost declined the call, until something instinctive made me answer. "Evelyn, it's me, Megan." I gripped the phone tightly and stayed silent for a few seconds. Not out of anger, just not knowing what that voice would bring. "I'm not calling to apologize. I think I said enough that night, but I just found something, and I can't keep it to myself." I waited quietly. Her voice shook. "I'm pregnant. With Jason's child." I thought I misheard. "How far along?" 10 weeks. I found out after that night. The night I saw you in the apartment. I wasn't going to tell him, but yesterday he came to my place. Jason told me you were losing it, that you were trying to destroy his career. He begged me to testify that our relationship only started after his divorce. I sank into a chair, my hand tightening into a fist. "What did he tell you about me?" Megan hesitated. "That you were a bitter ex-wife. Controlling, unreasonable, didn't want kids, that you made him feel like he wasn't himself anymore." My throat tightened. For 3 years I'd tried to convince Jason to get fertility tests. He always found an excuse. Too busy, unstable finances, or that he didn't want to force fate. Turns out, fate wasn't the issue. Megan continued, her voice steadier. "I want nothing more to do with him, but I think you should know something else. I checked his phone, emails, apps, everything. Evelyn?" I wasn't the only one. Silence. "I found messages with at least 4 other women. One named Brianna. He met her at a medical conference in Texas. Another was a personal trainer. Then there's Danielle, who works in pharma. They've been seeing each other for over 2 years from what I can tell." I didn't react. Just felt a coldness creep through my spine. I printed out the messages, screenshots, email history, and flagged some suspicious financial transfers from his account. "If you want them, I can send everything." "I do," I said firmly. "Like stealing a vault." "One more thing. Yesterday when he called me, he said he might wrap up the divorce quickly by filing for bankruptcy. But I work in finance. I know how to read numbers. His clinic isn't losing money. I've seen the books. They're profiting. Jason's hiding income." I leaned back and exhaled slowly. "Send me everything, or better yet, let's meet in person." We agreed to meet at a small riverside cafe, far from anyone who might recognize us. Megan arrived dressed simply, face bare of makeup. The polished persona was gone. She slid a thick envelope across the table. "I don't need him to support me, but this child does, and I will fight for what's right for my baby. I won't be part of Jason's lies. I think you understand that better than anyone." I opened the envelope. Inside were undeniable pieces of evidence, chats with multiple women, message screenshots, secret meeting arrangements, and a detailed transfer report showing money funneled from his clinic to a hidden secondary account. I looked up. Megan wasn't crying. Her hand was pressed firmly over her stomach. "I'll be filing for child support, and if you need me to testify in court, I will." I looked at her, not with the eyes of someone betrayed by the same man, but with the recognition of someone who understood we were both casualties of the same war. "Thank you. This changes everything." That night, I sat across from Riley in her office, warm lamplight casting sharp shadows over the papers laid out before us. Riley's expression tightened with resolve. "Good," she said. "This isn't just a messy divorce anymore. This is a web of calculated deception, and we're going to dismantle it, piece by piece." I said nothing, just stared at Jason's name repeating across page after page. He built a cage out of lies. And now, I would be the one to unlock it. The next morning, Riley arrived in a charcoal gray suit, hair neatly tied back, eyes sharp as a scalpel. She dropped a 3-inch thick file onto the table and spoke as calmly as if reading off a restaurant menu. "We're suing Jason Warren on 3 major accounts: serial infidelity, financial fraud, and intentional misrepresentation of marital assets during division proceedings." I sat across from her, eyes locked on the file. The evidence Megan, Grant, and I had gathered. Every shady transfer, every photo, every message was now in Riley's hands. He thought he could hide the clinic's income by filtering it through a shell LLC and into a private investment account, she said, eyes still on her laptop. "But the bank report confirms the funds went directly from the business entity into his personal account. We've got fingerprints, we've got timestamps, we've got intent." "And the court can freeze all assets?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Not just can. It's almost guaranteed with this stack of evidence. I'll be filing for full discovery within 2 weeks. That includes the house, cars, investments, the clinic, retirement accounts. We're not leaving a single cent behind." My breath caught slightly at the word clinic. It used to be a dream we built together. Now, it was the battlefield. But sentiment wasn't enough to hold me back. Not anymore. The court motion was filed that same afternoon. 2 days later, an emergency ruling came through. Freeze on all assets under Jason's name, both personal and business, including the Tribeca condo and any account linked to Cedar 41 Holdings. That Saturday morning, I was arranging flowers in the living room when the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Jason stood there, not the composed version I remembered. His shirt was wrinkled, eyes sunken. He held a small wooden box, the keepsake I had crafted for our 15th anniversary. "Evelyn, we need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, expression unmoved. "It's too late, Jason. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to talk. About everything. We had good years, remember? That winter trip to Vermont where you said, 'This is where I want to retire'? I was planning to buy that land. I swear." I cut him off, my voice neither cold nor warm. "You're not here to apologize. You're here to tug at my memories. But Jason, you already burned everything down." He stepped closer. "You've changed. You're cold, harsh. This isn't the Evelyn I loved." I looked him in the eyes. "You're right. I'm not that woman anymore, but don't forget, I didn't become this person on my own. You made her." Jason said nothing. His grip tightened around the wooden box, knuckles white. Just then, a black SUV pulled up in front of the house. A court-appointed appraiser stepped out with a case of photography equipment. Another woman followed with a tablet, scanning the space. The wall art, furniture, handcrafted items, even the piano Jason once begged me to buy. "Mr. Jason Warren, we're here from the Federal Appraisal Office, per court order. We'll be photographing the property for asset evaluation." Jason froze. I stepped aside quietly and opened the door wider. "Go ahead. There's plenty worth documenting in this house." Jason backed all the way to the curb, unable to step inside. His eyes scanned the home like it was unfamiliar. And now, more than ever, he didn't belong here. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply stood there, calmly witnessing the unraveling of everything he once hid, manipulated, thought he controlled, now stripped away layer by layer. by law, by proof, and by a silence sharper than any words. As the appraisers began photographing the office, Jason turned and walked away, retreating to his car. I didn't stop him. I didn't even look back. I closed the door behind me, on him, on the past. The story wasn't over, but from here on out, the words were mine. 3 months after the first hearing, it all wrapped up faster than I expected. Jason had no choice. With overwhelming evidence from me, Megan, the bank, and the independent audit team Riley brought in, the court ruled entirely in my favor. I was granted 75% of our shared assets, sole ownership of the house we once lived in, and a monthly spousal support payment for 3 years, enough to rebuild my life without depending on anyone. Jason kept the clinic under his name, but it wasn't smooth sailing. The independent financial investigation Riley initiated expanded when signs of tax evasion and unreported cash withdrawals over the past 2 years emerged. Federal auditors were now involved. The Tribeca condo was sold per the divorce agreement. The proceeds were split evenly. I didn't need a cent from that place built on lies. But I didn't reject my share either. It was what I was owed, not for the money, but for the justice. Jason never resurfaced after the final ruling. His attorney sent a letter asking to settle things quietly. I let the silence speak for itself. I had too much to do. In April, I accepted a formal offer to join the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago as a painting conservator. A job I once gave up 7 years ago because Jason said art doesn't pay the bills. Now every morning I entered the restoration lab with magnifying lenses and white gloves, carefully piecing together the fragments not just of damaged canvases, but of my own life. One quiet Thursday afternoon, while adjusting lighting on a 19th century oil painting, Connor, the one who helped me trace Jason's hidden funds, appeared through the glass door. He stood there with a small paper bag, smiling a little awkwardly, as if unsure whether he should come in. I motioned for him to wait and stepped out, slipping off my gloves. "I had a meeting upstairs, thought maybe you wouldn't hate seeing me," he said, that familiar warm tone still unchanged. I gave a soft smile. "I don't hate it, but I'm not sure I'm ready for anything either." He understood. He didn't push. Hermes Birkenback with the caption, "This is for you, no pressure, just a small gift." I opened the bag. Inside was a small glass orb, clear with a delicate light blue water lily blooming inside, quietly beautiful. I looked at him, waiting for an explanation. "You once said water lilies grow from the mud but still reach for the light. I thought it reminded me of you. You didn't need anyone to lift you. You bloomed in your own way." I chose silence. And in that stillness something long dormant began to soften inside me. Connor stepped away after that. No follow-ups, no expectations. Just a small folded note tucked beside the orb. "If one day you'd like to grab coffee, no rush, no pressure. See." That evening, I placed the water lily orb on the windowsill of my new apartment. The lights from the building across the street cast a glow through it, making the tiny petals shimmer softly. I poured myself a glass of white wine, sat down at the old oak table I brought from the old house, and opened my laptop. I continued reading a research draft on 18th century painting restoration. No one interrupted me, no incessant phone calls, no more questions like, "What are you doing?" paired with judgmental looks. Just me, and my own choices. Megan had given birth to a daughter earlier in the month, according to a short message she sent. A distant photo, the baby wrapped in a cream blanket, eyes closed as if listening to something in a dream. I didn't ask for more. Nor did I offer to meet. But I was glad she chose to move forward in her own way. And I understood that feeling. Jason never reached out again. According to Riley, his office was undergoing periodic audits by the IRS. Part of his assets had been temporarily frozen. At the end of June, I accepted an invitation to speak at the National Art Restoration Conference in Seattle, something I'd always turned down in the past because the family needed me home. Now there were no more restraints. I walked on stage with my hair tied low, wearing a cream linen suit, ready to deliver a talk titled, "When Art Restores Itself." The auditorium fell silent as I spoke about the process of restoring an oil painting partially burned in a fire. I talked about how it takes time, light, and patience to bring peeling colors back near their original form. Then I paused for a moment, and closed with a line that even made me tighten my grip under the podium. Sometimes, it's not the painting that needs restoring, it's the person holding the brush. After the talk, I received a few professional inquiries, including one from a museum in New York, but I didn't rush to respond. I was no longer someone who reacted impulsively. I now chose my steps with intention. That afternoon, when I returned to my apartment by Lake Michigan, I found a letter slipped under the door. No envelope, no sender name. Just a sheet of white paper, slanted handwriting I knew too well. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you're living true to yourself, Jane. I folded the paper and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Not because I needed to keep it, but because I no longer felt the need to tear it up. A week later, Connor and I went to an exhibit by a young French artist at the Institute. It wasn't a date, just two friends who loved art. After we left the gallery, he asked if I'd like to grab dinner. I paused for a few seconds, then said, "Yeah." Dinner was calm, no pressure. No probing questions like, "What's next for you?" or, "Are you ready to open your heart again?" Just two people sitting across a candlelit table sharing stories about work, new projects, and the unfinished pieces of life. When we said goodbye at my door, Connor didn't ask for anything. He simply said, "No matter what, I've always thought you're the strongest woman I've ever met." I smiled. That night I brewed a pot of jasmine tea and sat by the window, watching the distant city lights glimmer across the lake. The apartment no longer felt empty like it had in those early days. It now felt like the place I chose, not the place I ran to after pain. On a small wooden shelf near the window, the water lily orb still sat quietly, catching the light and casting soft colors on the wall. I thought back to who I was a year ago, curled up on the sofa, swallowing the feeling of being replaced, betrayed, erased from a life I helped build. I was no longer the betrayed wife. I was a restoration artist, a woman who rebuilt herself, someone who didn't need a script written by others because I held the pen now. I once vowed to fight for my marriage to the very end. But some vows once broken are no longer worth keeping. And some promises made when we've learned to stand again are the ones that truly matter. I whispered, a vow meant only for myself. The most sacred vows aren't to others, they're the promises we make to ourselves. I took a sip of tea, the warmth spreading through my chest. Outside, the city was still humming, the lake still mirrored the shifting sky. And inside, I finally felt light, no longer straining just to exist. Evelyn's story isn't just a journey out of a broken marriage. It's a powerful reminder that betrayal does not define a woman's worth. In real life, many carry wounds that seem too deep to heal. But like Evelyn, they can rebuild. With courage, wisdom, and resolve. No one deserves to be abandoned in their own life. And sometimes, the best commitments come not from shared vows, but from the quiet promises we keep to ourselves. To live fully and live true. What do you think about Evelyn's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, inspiring stories about family and life.